Hello, how are you? I'm Margarita Poggi, the head of Buenos Aires office of the International Institute for Educational Planning. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this first eForum Hangout that is organized by IIEP. This is the first of a series of Hangouts that will take place during this week and the next one. And you are invited to send us different questions and comments on my presentation that I will try to address after my presentation is finished. Also, there will be a PowerPoint presentation after this Hangout is finished that will be uploaded in the platform. My presentation will focus on evaluation of educational quality, and mainly on national systems and international studies in Latin American countries. As I am head of this Buenos Aires office that works mainly with Latin American countries, my expertise is on this region, and I will share with you some ideas on what's happening in the region around evaluation and quality. I have organized my presentation in 3 sections. The first one will focus on the concept on quality and educational evaluation. The second section will focus on the national evaluation systems that different countries are implementing in the region. And the third one will be centered in some international and regional studies of evaluation of educational qualities that in which different countries are participating. Finally, I'll mention some challenges related to these topics that should be addressed in the future. Well, going to the first section, the first issue I want to address is related to the concept of quality. And there has been a huge discussion in Latin American countries around this concept. It is polysemic, undefined, ambiguous, especially when it is applied to the educational field. It's a multidimensional concept that implies understanding it as a complex construct with different dimensions. During the 90s and the 2000s, there was a huge discussion in Latin American countries around this concept. And the UNESCO Santiago office made an excellent work coordinating these discussions in the framework of respect for rights. And in this case, a document was approved by the ministers and vice ministers of the countries of the region in 2007 that defines the different dimensions that should be involved when defining what we understand by education, of quality of education. And in this sense, there are the 2 basic attributes that had been part of this concept, that is efficacy and efficiency. Of course, they were included as dimension of this concept, but there were other 3 dimensions that are very important and that they were raised in the discussions that took place in the region. And these dimensions are that of social relevance of contents, the pertinence of contents that should be evaluated in regarding the social and cultural background and the different capacities that the different students have. And the third dimension that was added was that of equity, and this is related to the important inequalities that characterize the countries of the region and their educational systems, and mainly regarding this issue, the inequalities regarding the access to knowledge. So this huge discussion took place mainly in the last decade, and included these 5 dimensions was part of the agreements that were raised in different meetings. I should say, nevertheless, I should say that discussion is not yet finished, because there is not a total agreement of what we understand by quality of education. Regarding the evaluation systems, and in this case, I'm going to mention mainly the standardized evaluation systems that were organized by different countries of the region, mainly since the late 80s, but especially during the 90s, where different national evaluation systems were launched. In some cases, they were consolidated, and the countries, or some countries of the region, started to participate in different international and regional studies. When we analyze this participation in international and regional studies, we find some countries that have participated in studies of the IEA, that's TEAMS, a study on science and math, and PILS, studies on reading literacy. There are many countries participating in PISA, the study that was launched by OECD in 2000, and this participation has increased over the years. In fact, in 2015, 10 countries of the region participated in PISA, while only 5 countries had participated in 2000. And there is a regional study that is coordinated by the UNESCO Santiago office, the Latin American Laboratory of Evaluation of Quality Education, that has implemented the third study in primary level. In this third study was implemented in 2013, and 15 countries and 1 state of Mexico participated in it. So there has been, when one analyzes the 90s, especially the 2000s, an increasing participation in international and regional studies, and a consolidation of the national education evaluation systems. This took place while the states made important efforts to expand the school systems, not only in primary, but also in pre-primary and in lower secondary education. And we must say also that in the 2000s, there is an important effort in different states to increase the participation and expand the higher secondary education. So this process of expanding the educational systems go hand in hand with the consolidation of these evaluation systems, and they are to some extent linked to finding new ways to regulate and control education systems. When we analyze some of the main changes that took place from the 90s to the 2000s in this standardized evaluations students' achievement in Latin America, there has been some conceptual changes and some methodological changes that are important to be pointed out. From the point of view of the conceptual changes, there has been a shift from a monolithic to a pluralist notion of evaluation, and this is related to the abandonment of the concept of evaluation as value-free. When we evaluate an educational system, the students' achievement, schools, whatever a policy, an educational policy, evaluation implies that value judgments are produced. So this is important to be pointed out. And there has been important contribution also of different disciplines to the field of evaluation to enrich this approach. From the methodological change, methodological changes that took place in the region, I would like to draw the attention to two main changes. One is related to the gradual acceptance of the need to combine methods. And this is related to the introduction of qualitative approaches that are combined, that are added to the quantitative approaches that in the first generations of evaluation systems were promoted. And the second methodological change is related to an important debate that is not yet solved and is related to the nature of causality. There are different debates about the causes that allow for a student's achievement, and what has been discussed in the region is that we need to pay attention to the different dimensions and variables that are involved in the student's achievement. When the first national standardized evaluation systems were launched and implemented, there was a huge discussion and in many cases a lot of criticism, because these standardized evaluations were implemented by establishing that they were going to be a pillar in the evaluation of quality education, but some critics in the region came from the scope of the evaluation. I will explain this better. The critics of this issue said at the moment that to evaluate the quality of education, the quality of an education system, you shouldn't focus only on a student's achievement, and other variables and other levels of the policy decision making should be included in this evaluation. But mainly these evaluation systems were focused on student achievements, and in particular in some selected curricular areas. These are language and math, though in some cases, in some countries, there are evaluations on some other areas as science or social studies. The other critics that were raised at that moment was that the school performance was evaluated only on the student achievement evaluation. And in this also, it was raised that other variables should be included to evaluate the school performance. When we analyze the evaluation systems in the region, they are mainly focused on the evaluation of students' achievement, as I just said, in math and language, and in those grades where the completion of an educational level is established. And there has been a lot of comings and goings related to the coverage, because some countries organize census for these evaluations, and some others are organized on a sample design. But in some cases, countries come and go or revise these decisions depending on the uses of the evaluation. And there has been also, in some cases, a shift from evaluating every year the same grades and the same curricular areas to go to multi-annual cycles for the evaluation. And in this case, the international and regional studies have helped to make these decisions. Regarding the organizational structure of the departments in charge of the standardized evaluations, there are two main trains in the region. In some countries, they are located in the directorates within the ministries of education, and in some other countries, and this is an increasing trend, different national institutes of evaluation have been created. currently there are national institutes of evaluations in Mexico, Colombia, Brazil, Ecuador, Uruguay, and maybe I forget some other, but this is a trend in the region. Nevertheless, the type of the evaluations have been improved throughout these years, and what is happening with where the institutes were created, that these are more autonomous of the ministries of education of the country, but they have a very different structure in each of the countries that I have mentioned. Well, I mentioned before that there was an increasing trend to participate in international and regional studies, and I want to share with you some ideas about these studies I mentioned before and how they contribute, and they have done a lot in this sense to also improve the national studies. In fact, the potential of the international studies is related to different issues. Firstly, the result of the country can be compared throughout a period. And this is important. I want to draw attention to this, because when the national evaluation systems started in the 90s in the region, in many cases, the results cannot be compared from one year to other. And when the countries started to participate in international studies, they also improved their national evaluation systems in order that comparison could be developed. Also, international studies allow for comparison between countries, and this might be interesting, though there are an important discussion on these comparisons. And these studies also allow the identification of the strong and weak aspect of the educational systems analyzed, especially in those levels where these studies are implemented. What is important that in international and regional studies and in the national evaluation systems, background questionnaires had been applied during the past years in order to have complementary information to analyze the data related to the students' achievement. But as these international and regional studies have important issues and have added to and have been a part of the improvement of the national evaluation system, there are also some limitation of these international studies, and these are mainly related to the macroscopic perspective that they have and the standardized analysis that they produce, and that needs to be contextualized either at national or regional level. In fact, the agencies that promote these international and regional studies encourage the countries to produce the national report. That this is the case, for example, with PISA, and in many cases you can have access to the international report produced by the OECD on PISA, but also to some national reports that are produced in some countries of the region. And there was also an interesting initiative some years ago. I think that it was with PISA 2000, the study of PISA in 2009, where a regional study was produced by the different countries that participated in that study. And this is related to the issue that to understand and analyze what the international studies produce about an educational system, you must always have into account the specific characteristics of the national educational system and some of the traditions and the history of these systems to understand, digamos, what the study has produced about the country. As we are approaching to the scheduled time, I will share with you some challenges that should be addressed by the countries of the region in the future related to quality and evaluation. And these are the following ones. Well, one of the main issues that I think that should be addressed is the review of the design and a strategy of the evaluation from a rights perspective on education. This, I think, that will produce an important impact on the evaluations that are being implemented, because the rights perspective on education has been raised in many educational laws in the countries of the region, and so they should impact on how we evaluate the educational system. In this sense, there is an interesting initiative that is being developed by the National Institute of Evaluation in Mexico, and they are producing some evaluations trying to analyze which are the conditions that should be present at school level in order to guarantee the right to the education to every child. Well, so this is a first and important challenge that should be addressed by the different countries. The other challenge is related to the expansion of the areas that should be evaluated. There are a lot of criticism around that evaluation shouldn't be focused only on math and language, and that other areas should be also evaluated, though in many cases these evaluations are difficult to design and implement, but this should be also addressed. A third challenge that should be discussed in the region is to review the balance between high-stakes evaluations and formative evaluation, yeah? And the balance between summative evaluation and formative evaluation. And this is related to a fourth challenge that is the coordination between standardized external evaluation and internal evaluation. Because at school level, a lot of evaluations take place. Teachers, professors are always evaluating or assessing the students' achievement, but in many cases, these are not coordinated with a standardized evaluation that are implemented by the ministries of education or the National Institutes of Evaluation. A fifth challenge that should be also discussed is that related to the integration of different sources of information when we want to analyze and understand what is happening in an educational system. There are statistical indicators, evaluative research, other secondary sources, and in many cases, these are not integrated with the standardized evaluation. And if this integration took place, and a more comprehensive and integral panorama of the educational system could be produced. And one last challenge, among others, is related to the production of ad hoc systems for monitoring and evaluating plans, policy plans and programs or policy projects. This is generally a weaker function within the policy cycle, and so this is part of how we evaluate an educational system, and so efforts in this direction should be done. Okay, I think that with this, I have at least shared with you the main trends that one can analyze in Latin American countries. Please, those who want to get in touch with us through the chat, you can send questions, comments, in order that I can take them and maybe go to some of the issues that I have shared with you in a more detailed way. Well, we have, in fact, already one question. I'm going to read this, and while we wait for others that you can send us, if any, what is the relationship between evaluation of education quality and its improvement, maybe in terms of student achievement? Well, this is a very interesting question because it goes directly to the relationship between a standardized evaluation and policies oriented to improvement of quality. Of course, that I will point out some ideas on, and this will, in fact, to answer thoroughly this question should require maybe another half an hour or an hour of explanations. But I think that one issue that was criticized in the 90s in the region is that many of the standardized evaluation systems were implemented with the goal of improving quality. But what was analyzed once these systems were implemented, that evaluating an educational system or a level of the educational system did not reflect immediately in the improvement of the students' achievement. Of course, in this case, there should be an alignment of learning goals, of curricular policies, of teaching strategies, and of teacher training policies. And in this sense, there is a broader intervention of the policies that must be designed and implemented. But the results of the standardized evaluations are very important to analyze the trends of an educational system and provide an important data on how these trends are developing. So there is of course a link, but to improve education, the quality of education of an educational systems requires a lot of alignment of other policies that are involved with this improvement. And in this case, the evaluation is one of the pillars of these improvement qualities, but one of them, not the only one. And these policies that I have mentioned related, for example, to teaching and learning policies and to teaching to teacher training policies are very important for the improvement of quality of education. Hello, I'm back. There are three groups of questions. I will mention the topics and then I'll try to answer or at least share with you some ideas around them. The first group is related to the comparisons among educational systems. I will come to this. Then a second question is related to the adaptation, if we can create an adaptation between summative and formative evaluation. And the third group of questions is related to the cooperation among countries. Well, I will go to the first one, that is the comparisons among educational systems, and in many cases, I think that the question was strictly related to this. Some say comparisons are not possible, and some others say comparisons are possible. And I think that comparisons between educational systems are possible, but in the case of evaluating different educational systems, this comparison depends on, first, on the design of the study and how this, the different instruments, the test, the questionnaires are built, and how they take into account the different characteristics of the educational system that lead to the type of analysis that is done with the data collected. That is why I mentioned in my presentation that every international or regional study should be contextualized to each country that has participated in the study. Maybe that the general reports offer an important overview of what has been evaluated, but in many cases to understand and mainly to inform policies, then a national report, a national analysis should be done. So if the designs takes into account the different characteristics, at least they can be typified. The international study cannot take into account each country, but they can be typified. And the type of analysis that we do with the data collected may help that comparisons are not only relevant for countries, but also fair for them. The other issue was related to the adaptation between summative and formative evaluation. In this sense, I should change a word. Maybe the issue is not how the adaptation should take place, but how this evaluation, summative and formative evaluation, should be coordinated, because they have different goals, they have different strategies. But what I mentioned in my presentation, that a strong coordination between evaluations that have a formative goal, that is to accompany the process of learning of all students at school level, and the goals of a summative evaluation that's more related to promotion of grade or to concluding a level of the educational system, and this should be more coordinated in the strategies of evaluations that are designed and implemented by the Department of Evaluation of the Ministry of Education. And the third issue is related to cooperation among countries and with other countries. And in this sense, I think that I just mentioned it very quickly. The regional study that is organized by UNESCO Santiago office, one of the laboratory, is an excellent example of cooperation among countries in Latin American region, because this study was coordinated by UNESCO, but the departments of evaluation or the institutes of evaluation of the countries played an important role in all the process of the design of the study, in the process of implementation of the study, and the process of analysis of the data collected. So there was not only a strong participation, but also a strengthening of capacities for evaluating that was promoting in all the work that was organized by the UNESCO Santiago office. And related to cooperation with other countries, there was a question related, can you help us to improve quality education? And this is related on how we think IAP works, not only in evaluation and in planning and managing of educational policies. We think that it's very important the cooperations between countries, that experiences must be shared, but that any initiative cannot be copied from one country to other. They should be always contextualized, taken into account the characteristic of educational system, the traditions, the history of the country, the history and tradition of the educational system. So you cannot translate an experience from one country to other, but you can learn of what others have done and have implemented, and also we can learn a lot of the, not only of the successes, but all of the failures to improve quality education. So if you take into account these considerations, I think that there should be an important issue related to cooperation between countries or among countries related to the improvement of quality of education. There is another question I am receiving this at this moment. It's related to the science about the different studies of the laboratory and the impact they have had in the national education system. Can you provide an example? Well, the example, without knowing these questions, I have already mentioned a possible answer to it. An impact has been, I have no doubt on this, on the strengthening of capacity of the evaluation teams at the Ministry of Education level or at the institutes that have been created in the countries. The cooperation established in during this process has allowed this throughout the years and throughout the cycle that these different studies were implemented. There is a more general issue that is related to the impact of the evaluations, either national or regional or international, in the national education systems. And in that, I think that there has been improvements in this relationship, but there are strong efforts to keep and to improve, because there is not a direct relationship between the result of the study, either national, regional, or international, and the changes that should take place in a national educational system in order that this is it is improved. And in this case, the alignment with other policies that are designed and implemented by ministries of education is an important issue that must be addressed. Well, now I think that I have answered the questions received. I am very grateful for them, and in some minutes the PowerPoint presentation, you will have access to the PowerPoint presentation. Bye-bye.